I hated Tomb Raider for years. Then I finally played the 2013 reboot, and it blew my expectations out of the water. The old games were clunky puzzle adventures with terrible controls. This one? Pure action, smooth combat, and a whole new vibe. The older games I would describe as puzzle platformers with a light emphasis on action. Luckily though, with Tomb Raider 2013, it's kind of the opposite. I would describe this reboot as sort of an action/adventure with very light touches of puzzles instead. Instead of the boring and convoluted puzzles of the previous games, now you have constant gunplay that has a lot of impact and very satisfying, though it's in the generic cover-based shooter format. Gone is the crappy lock-on aim system of the older games. As the game progresses, you get put up against more and more varied types of enemies with more and more armor, which keeps the pace fresh and interesting. There's a skill system that gives you as expected perks to help with the ramp in difficulty. There is technically only 4 weapons, but you can find weapon pieces around the game and upgrade them into different weapons of the same category. I found it satisfying to unlock new guns and put attachments on them. There's 3 difficulties, and I played on normal, so the game never really felt difficult at all though. I would wager even on the hardest difficulty it would still be quite easy due to the nature of the mechanics. You can hit Q at any time to highlight every single enemy on the map in red, and you can even see them through walls, as well as the game goes in slow motion. This alone makes the game pretty damn easy, and I would argue it should have just been taken out of the game entirely, or at least locked behind a hard to get perk. The game is extremely narrative driven, and you will constantly be watching cutscenes and be taken out of the gameplay, which is kind of a negative, but the pacing of the game is very solid, and you never really feel bored or like you're wasting your time. There's also tons of quick time events, something I'm never a fan of. It's pretty overdone here, but it does help the narrative, I guess. Though there's actually some quick time events that I enjoyed, like that messed up assault scene. That was pretty intense. The story is serviceable, but pretty generic. You find yourself trapped on an island, and you cannot leave due to some ancient Japanese curse. That's pretty much the whole story. The characters are interesting, and the voice acting and dialogue is pretty solid, but it's nothing that will stay with you or anything. There's some pretty frustrating and bullshit climbing sections that are totally trial and error. Not because of a lack of player skill, but because of a lack of identifying what the hell you're supposed to be doing. It kind of uses the modern style scripted platforming method, where it's not what I would call true platforming, but it's more like hit the jump button on the correct area and it locks you into a scripted animation and you progress. It's done better in this game than most because of the smooth animations and solid controls, but there are some segments where it's unclear how to progress because the area is not identified with anything and you'll die over and over guessing what the actual correct place to jump is. My favorite moments in the game is when it just swarms you with enemies and you have to kill them all and find cover and dodge their explosions. The AI is pretty solid as they flank you and are constantly chatting among themselves, calling out their actions in a realistic squad fashion. You can press a dodge button to roll around and bash them with your axe while dodging their gunfire, and it's a very satisfying combat loop. Swapping back and forth between the weapons, executing headshots, swapping to the shotgun and blasting the shield guys or heavily armored guys, and hearing the meaty sound effects, it's all pretty fun. Also, there's some truly gruesome and dark, almost horror-style elements, where you're crawling around dungeons full of decapitated bodies, and there's insane cult murderers wandering around, and I found these moments really sick and fun. It adds a real edge to the whole game. Sometimes you come across a puzzle, and at most I got stumped for like 10 minutes, but it's never overcomplicated like the previous games. I enjoyed some of the puzzles, and they're often physics-based. You have a lot of tools for traversing the environment, like a bow that shoots ropes, and your axe that you can climb with, and you often use these to solve puzzles as well. You're never left wondering what to do, because you can hit Q at any moment to see an arrow pointing to the objective, and it also highlights all the relevant objects in the environment required to progress, which again, really helps the pacing. The best things about the game are the pacing, the combat system, and the graphics are pretty solid too. You can free roam, kind of, and fast travel to find optional unlocks and do optional short tombs for rewards, but I never really felt the need or desire. I was never struggling with the combat, as it's kinda skill-based and I don't need a bunch of easy perks from optional exploration, and by the end of the game, I mostly had everything unlocked anyway. At the end credits, it said I only had 64% of the game technically completed, but all it means is I could go back and free roam after the story mode to collect all the little trinkets and audio logs and stuff like that. Things I don't really see the need for, but it's an interesting inclusion if you want to spend even more time with the game. Really, Tomb Raider 2013 has exceeded my expectations because I never really had any. I came in expecting the worst because I kind of hate the whole franchise. but I was happy to see that this is an entire rework of the series. I know that some people might not like the new direction, and they like the older, more puzzle-based games instead, and that's fine, but those older games aren't for me. But this is actually a case for me where the newer reboot is superior to the original games, as I don't like the overly complex, annoying puzzles of the originals, and the controls are just bad, and I much rather the action combat and traversing big open wide environments of the reboot. My main critiques are how the game is at times more like a movie than a video game. You'll be constantly in a scripted sequence where you just have to hold forward to progress, where Lara will be talking to herself or observing things like a movie. Sometimes I would just like to actually control the game for 30 minutes straight without interruption, you know? Well, it's not that big of a deal. It does keep it interesting by constantly developing the story, so it's a trade-off. It only took me 7 hours to complete the story and see the end credits, and I never felt bored or pained throughout it, except for a few bullshit trial and error climbing segments. If this is an indication of how the franchise is going forward, then I'm happy to see this direction. 7 out of 10.